The rain pounded the pavement outside the cafe, a relentless drumbeat that mirrored the chaos in my chest. I sat hunched in the bathroom stall, the cold tile wall pressing against my forehead, tears burning trails down my face. I'd come to this small-town cafe in Willow Creek, Oregon, to escape, but the weight of my life followed me like a shadow. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and I was 24, running from a family that didn't understand and a town that judged. I'd left behind a life in Boise where my father's last words, "You're no son of mine," still echoed, sharp as a blade. The cafe, with its warm wooden tables and the faint scent of roasted coffee, had seemed like a safe haven when I'd stumbled in, soaked and shivering. But the moment I locked myself in the bathroom, the dam broke. I couldn't stop crying ugly, choking sobs that felt like they'd tear me apart. That's when I heard it, a soft rustle at the bottom of the door. I glanced down, expecting nothing, but there it was, a small pack of tissues, pushed gently across the grimy floor. No note, no voice, just that quiet act of kindness. I froze, my breath catching. Who does that? Who sees a stranger's pain and cares enough to act without asking for anything in return? I grabbed the tissues, clutching them like a lifeline, and pressed one to my face, the faint scent of lavender calming my ragged breaths. I didn't know it then, but that moment would change everything. The cafe was called the Rusty Mug, a place where locals gathered to escape the drizzle of the Pacific Northwest. It was small, with mismatched chairs and walls lined with old photos of Willow Creek's logging days. I'd chosen a corner table near the window, where I could watch the rain blur the world outside. My backpack, stuffed with everything I owned, sat at my feet. I'd been on the road for weeks, piecing together a new life after my family disowned me for coming out. Boise was a memory now, one I wanted to forget. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness grounding me, and tried to shake off the bathroom breakdown. The tissues were still in my pocket, a reminder of the stranger's kindness. I scanned the room, wondering who it could have been. The barista, a woman with a nose ring and a quick smile, was busy steaming milk. An older couple shared a slice of pie in the corner, their laughter soft and warm. A guy in a flannel shirt sat near the counter, his head buried in a book, glasses slipping down his nose. He looked about my age, maybe a little older, with dark curls and a quiet intensity. Could it have been him? I didn't have the courage to ask. Instead, I pulled out my journal, a battered notebook where I scribbled my thoughts. Someone saw me at my worst today, I wrote, and they didn't turn away. They gave me tissues. Why does that feel like more than I deserve? Writing steadied me, but the question lingered. I wanted to know who cared and why. The door chimed, and a gust of damp air swept in. A man walked in, shaking rain from his jacket. He was tall, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed to carry a story of their own. He glanced around, then headed to the counter, his voice low as he ordered a black coffee. Something about him felt familiar, like a song you've heard but can't name. I watched him too long, and he caught my eye, offering a small nod before sitting a few tables away. My heart stuttered. Was he the one? I didn't approach him. Fear had a way of chaining me to my seat. Instead, I stayed in the cafe until the rain slowed, my mind spinning with possibilities. The tissues in my pocket felt like a promise I didn't understand yet. The next day, I returned to the Rusty Mug. I told myself it was for the coffee, but deep down, I hoped to see the stranger again. Willow Creek was small, and I figured whoever slipped me those tissues was a regular. I needed to know why they did it, not just out of curiosity, but because that small act had cracked something open inside me. For the first time in months, I felt seen. The cafe was quieter today, the rain replaced by a soft mist that clung to the windows. I ordered a latte and sat at the same corner table, my journal open in front of me. I wrote about the tissues, about the stranger, about the ache in my chest that felt less heavy today. What do you say to someone who saw you crying and didn't judge? I scribbled. Thank you feels too small. The door chimed, and the guy in the flannel from yesterday walked in. My pulse quickened. He ordered a tea this time, his voice soft but clear, and took a seat near the window. I stole glances at him, noting the way his fingers traced the edge of his book, the way his lips curved slightly when he read something amusing. He looked kind, the kind of person who might notice a stranger's pain. But I couldn't be sure. I was about to give up and leave when the barista called out, "Lucas, your tea's ready." The guy in the flannel looked up, smiling, and walked to the counter. Lucas. The name fit him simple, warm, unassuming. I watched him return to his seat, and for a moment, our eyes met. His were hazel, flecked with gold, and they held a quiet curiosity. I looked away, my face warm, and scribbled his name in my journal. That night, I lay in my motel bed, staring at the ceiling. Lucas. The tissues. The cafe. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't solve. I didn't know if he was the one, but I wanted him to be. For the first time since leaving Boise, I felt a spark of hope, a dangerous, fragile thing. By the third day, I was a regular at the Rusty Mug. The barista, whose name tag read Maddie, started calling me Latte Guy and gave me an extra shot of espresso on the house. I liked the routine. It made Willow Creek feel less like a pit stop and more like a place I could belong. But I was still chasing the mystery of the tissues. Lucas was there again, reading a different book, this to me a worn copy of The Great Gatsby. I wondered what he saw in it, if he was drawn to the longing, the unattainable dreams. I wanted to talk to him, but every time I tried to work up the nerve, my throat closed. What if he wasn't the one? What if he was? And I made a fool of myself. Instead, I wrote, Lucas, I don't know if it was you, but I want it to be. I want to believe someone like you could care. The words felt like a confession, one I'd never share. But they kept me grounded, kept me coming back to the cafe. That afternoon, something shifted. Lucas looked up from his book and caught me staring. Instead of looking away, he smiled a real smile, not polite or forced, but warm, like he'd been waiting for me to notice him. My heart slammed against my ribs. I managed a clumsy nod, and he stood, walking over to my table. Hey, he said, his voice soft but steady. I've seen you here a few times. You okay? I blinked, caught off guard. Yeah. Yeah, I'm okay. Just figuring things out. He nodded, like he understood more than I'd said. This place has a way of helping with that. I'm Lucas, by the way. Ethan, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. He sat down across from me, and just like that, the distance between us shrank. We talked about the cafe, about Willow Creek, about nothing and everything. His laugh was quiet but infectious, and his eyes never left mine. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. But I didn't ask about the tissues. Not yet. I wasn't ready to break the spell. Lucas became a fixture in my days at the Rusty Mug. Every morning, I'd walk through the mist-dampened streets of Willow Creek, my heart a little lighter knowing I'd see him. Our conversations grew longer, deeper, weaving through books, music, and the small quirks of this sleepy town. He was a teacher, a Lernita High School English teacher who loved poetry and had a quiet passion for helping kids find their voice. I told him bits of my story. Carefully edited, I was from Boise, taking a break from life, trying to start over. I left out the part about my family, the rejection, The weight of being gay in a place that didn't always accept it. But Lucas had a way of seeing through the cracks. "You write a lot," he said one day, nodding at my journal. "What's in there?" I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the notebook. "Just thoughts. Things I'm trying to figure out." He didn't push, but his eyes softened. "Writing's good for that. It's like untangling a knot. You know, one word at a time." I nodded, my throat tight. I wanted to tell him about the tissues, to ask if it was him, but the fear of being wrong or right kept me silent. Instead, I asked, "What do you write?" "Poetry, mostly," he said, a little shy. "Not great poetry, but it helps me think. I've got a notebook like yours, full of half-finished ideas." "Read me one," I said, surprising myself. He laughed, shaking his head. "Maybe someday. They're not ready yet." There was a promise in his words, a thread I wanted to pull. But I let it go, content to sit in the warmth of his presence. The cafe became our sanctuary, a place where the world's judgment couldn't reach us. Maddie started teasing us, calling us the book boys, and I didn't mind. It felt like we were building something, even if I didn't know what. One evening, the cafe was busier than usual, filled with a local book club discussing a novel I'd never heard of. Lucas and I shared a table, our knees brushing under the wood. The contact sent a jolt through me, and I wondered if he felt it too. He was telling me about a student who'd written a poem that made the whole class cry, his eyes bright with pride. "You love teaching, don't you?" I said, resting my chin on my hand. "It's not just teaching," he said. "It's seeing someone realize they're enough. You know, that their voice matters." His words hit me hard. I'd spent so long feeling like I wasn't enough, not for my family, not for Boise, not for myself. I looked at him, really looked, and saw something I hadn't before, a quiet strength, a kindness that didn't ask for anything in return. My heart whispered that he was the one who'd slipped the tissues under the door, but I still couldn't bring myself to ask. Instead, I said, "You're good at making people feel like they matter." He blushed, ducking his head. "I try. Doesn't always work, but I try." We stayed until closing, the rain starting up again outside. Maddie shooed us out with a grin, and we stood under the awning, the world soft and blurry around us. Lucas looked at me, his breath visible in the chilly air. "Want to grab dinner sometime?" he asked, his voice steady but his eyes nervous. My heart leapt. "Yeah, I'd like that." We exchanged numbers, and as I walked back to my motel, the tissues in my pocket felt heavier, like they carried the weight of a question I was finally ready to ask. Dinner was at a small diner a few blocks from the cafe, a place with checkered floors and neon signs. Lucas wore a green sweater that made his eyes glow, and I couldn't stop staring. We talked about everything: our favorite books, the music we grew up on, the dreams we'd buried. I told him more about Boise, about the fights with my dad, though I still skirted the full truth. He listened, really listened, and it made me feel like I could breathe again. "You ever feel like you're running from something?" I asked, picking at my fries. He nodded, his expression distant. "Yeah. I grew up in a small town too, in Idaho. Not exactly the easiest place to be. Different." My heart stopped. "Different how?" He hesitated, then met my eyes. "I'm gay. Came out in college, and it wasn't pretty. My family's better now, but it took time." The air shifted, like a door had opened. I wanted to tell him I was gay too, that I understood, but the word stuck. Instead, I said, "I'm glad you had this place. Willow Creek seems kind." "It is," he said. Mostly. But it's not perfect. Nowhere is. We walked back through the quiet streets, our shoulders brushing. At my motel, he paused, his hands in his pockets. I'm glad you're here, Ethan. Me too, I said, and I meant it. That night, I wrote in my journal, Lucas is gay. He gets it. Maybe he's the one who saw me crying. Maybe he's the one I've been waiting to meet. The next week was a blur of cafe visits and late-night texts. Lucas sent me poems not his, but ones he loved, by Whitman and Auden, their words weaving love and longing into something sacred. I sent him songs, ones that felt like confessions I wasn't ready to speak. We were dancing around something, and I think we both knew it. But doubt crept in. What if Lucas wasn't the one who'd given me the tissues? What if I was building him up in my mind, seeing what I wanted to see? I started noticing others in the Café, older couple, always kind, Maddie, who seemed to know everyone's secrets, even a quiet woman who sketched in the corner. Any of them could have been the one. The uncertainty gnawed at me, but so did the fear of ruining what I had with Lucas. One afternoon, I arrived at the cafe to find Lucas waiting outside, his face tense. Can we talk? He asked. My stomach dropped. Sure. We walked to a nearby park, the air crisp with the scent of pine. He stopped by a bench, his hands fidgeting. I need to tell you something, he said. I saw you, that first day in the cafe. In the bathroom. I slipped the tissues under the door. My breath caught. It was you. He nodded, his eyes searching mine. I heard you crying, and I didn't know what to do. I wanted to help. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Why didn't you say anything? I didn't want to embarrass you, he said. And I was scared. I didn't know if you'd want to know it was me. I stepped closer, my voice shaking. Lucas, that was the kindest thing anyone's ever done for me. He smiled, small and shy. You look like you needed it. We stood there, the world fading around us. I wanted to reach for him, to close the gap, but fear held me back. Not yet. But soon. The confession changed everything. Knowing Lucas was the one who'd slipped the tissues under the door made him more than a kind stranger, was someone who'd seen me at my lowest and cared enough to act. It was a lifeline I hadn't known I needed, and it tethered me to him in a way I couldn't explain. We started spending more time outside the cafe. Lucas took me to his favorite spots in Willow Creek's used bookstore with creaky floors, a trail by the river where the water sparkled under the sun. Each moment felt like a gift, but I was still holding back. I hadn't told him I was gay, hadn't told him how his kindness had cracked open the walls I'd built around my heart. The fear of rejection, of repeating the pain of Boise, kept me silent. One evening, we sat on a bench by the river, the sky streaked with pink and gold. Lucas was quieter than usual, his hands clasped in his lap. You okay? I asked. He sighed, running a hand through his curls. There's something I haven't told you. About why I moved here. I waited, my heart tight. He looked out at the water, his voice low. After I came out, things got rough. My town wasn't accepting. There was this guy, someone I cared about. We were together in secret, but someone found out. They outed us, and it got ugly. He left, and I couldn't stay. Willow Creek was my fresh start. His words hit me like a punch. I knew that pain, the sting of betrayal, the weight of hiding. I'm sorry, I said, my voice thick. I get it. He turned to me, his eyes searching. Do you? I took a breath, the words clawing their way out. I'm gay too. Lucas. My family. They didn't take it well. That's why I left Boise. That's why I was crying that day in the cafe. His face softened, a mix of relief and understanding. I figured you might be, but I didn't want to assume. We sat in silence, the river's gentle rush filling the space. Then he reached for my hand, his fingers warm against mine. I'm glad you're here, Ethan. I squeezed his hand, my heart racing. Me too. Our relationship deepened, but it wasn't all easy. Willow Creek was kinder than Boise, but it wasn't perfect. We got looks sometimes subtle, but there when we held hands in public. Lucas brushed it off, but I could see the tension in his jaw. It reminded me of home, of the whispers that followed me after I came out. I wanted to protect him, to protect us, but I didn't know how. One night, we went to a local bar, a place Lucas said had the best burgers in town. It was crowded, the air thick with laughter and the clink of glasses. We sat in a booth, our knees touching, and for a while, it felt like we were the only ones there. But then I noticed a group of guys at the bar, their eyes lingering on us, their voices low and sharp. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut, muttered something to his friend, and they laughed, loud and cruel. Lucas tensed, his hand tightening around his glass. Ignore them, he said, but his voice was strained. I wanted to, but the air felt heavy, like a storm about to break. When we left, the guy with the buzz cut followed us outside. Hey, he called, his voice slurred. You two think you're cute, huh? My stomach twisted. Lucas stepped in front of me, his voice calm but firm. We're just leaving. No trouble. The guy smirked, stepping closer. This town doesn't need your kind. Before I could react, Lucas took my hand and pulled me away, his grip steady. We walked fast, the night air cold against my skin. When we reached his apartment, he locked the door and leaned against it, his face pale. You okay? I asked, my voice shaking. He nodded, but his eyes were haunted. I've heard worse, but it still gets to me. I stepped closer, cupping his face. You don't have to face it alone. He leaned into my touch, his eyes closing. Neither do you. We kissed then, soft and tentative, like we were afraid the moment would break. It was my first kiss in years, and it felt like coming home. The next day, we went back to the rusty mug, needing its warmth. Maddie greeted us with a grin, but I could tell she'd heard about the bar. You two okay? She asked, sliding us free pastries. We're good, Lucas said, but his smile was tight. I wanted to believe him, but the encounter had shaken me. It reminded me of Boise, of the fear that had driven me away. I didn't want to lose what we had, but doubt crept in. What if Willow Creek wasn't safe? What if we weren't? Lucas seemed to sense it. That afternoon, he handed me his notebook, filled with poems. Read them, he said. I want you to know me. I took it home and read every word. His poems were raw, full of longing and resilience, of love that fought to exist. One line stuck with me. I found you in the quiet, where kindness grows like wildflowers. I knew it was about me, about the tissues, about us. I called him that night, my voice thick with emotion. Your poems, they're beautiful. You're beautiful, he said, and I could hear his smile through the phone. We talked until dawn, sharing pieces of ourselves we'd kept hidden. I told him about my dad, about the years of pretending, about the hope I'd found in Willow Creek. He told me about his ex, about the pain of being outed, about the strength it took to start over. We were two broken pieces, fitting together in ways I hadn't thought possible. But the tension in Willow Creek grew. The guy from the bar, whose name we learned was Travis, seemed to be everywhere outside the cafe, at the grocery store, always watching. Lucas said he was harmless, just a loudmouth, but I wasn't so sure. I started noticing graffiti on the edge of town, slurs scrawled in red paint. It felt like a warning. One night, Lucas invited me to a poetry reading at the bookstore. He was nervous, his hands shaking as he prepared to read. I sat in the front row, my heart swelling with pride. His voice was steady, his words weaving a story of love and defiance. The crowd applauded, but I saw Travis in the back, his arms crossed, his eyes cold. Afterward, we walked home, the night quiet except for our footsteps. "You were amazing," I said, squeezing his hand. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I saw him. Travis. He's not going to let this go. I stopped, pulling him close. We're stronger than him. Than all of them. He looked at me, his eyes searching. You really believe that? I do, I said, and I meant it. For the first time, I felt like I could fight for this for us. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. It was a Saturday night, and Lucas and I were at the Rusty Mug, sharing a slice of pie. The cafe was quiet, the rain tapping softly against the windows. Maddie was wiping down the counter, humming to herself. Everything felt perfect until Travis walked in. He wasn't alone this time. Two other guys, their faces hard, stood behind him. The air shifted, heavy with intent. Lucas's hand tightened around mine under the table, but he didn't look away. Hey, Teach, Travis said, his voice loud enough to turn heads. Thought you'd know better than to flaunt this crap in our town. Maddie stepped forward, her voice sharp. Get out, Travis. You're not welcome here. He ignored her, his eyes locked on us. You two think you can just be like this, out in the open. I stood, my heart pounding. We're not hurting anyone. Leave us alone. Travis laughed, stepping closer. You don't belong here. Before I could respond, Lucas was on his feet, his voice steady. You don't get to decide that. This is my home. Our home. The room went silent, every eye on us. Travis's face twisted, and for a moment, I thought he'd swing. But Maddie was already on the phone, calling the sheriff, and the older couple from the corner stood, their presence a quiet show of support. Travis's friends hesitated, then pulled him back. Let's go, one of them muttered. Travis spat on the floor, his eyes burning. This ain't over. But as he left, something shifted. The cafe felt warmer, the people around us softer. Maddie brought us fresh coffee, her hand on my shoulder. You're safe here, she said. We've got you. Lucas looked at me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. You okay? I nodded, my throat tight. Because of you. The next week was tense, but Willow Creek rallied around us. The bookstore owner banned Travis from events. The sheriff, a gruff but fair woman, promised to keep an eye on him. And the locals people I'd barely noticed started stopping by our table at the cafe, offering kind words or small gifts. A kid from Lucas's class gave us a drawing of two stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. It made us both cry. But the real turning point came a month later. Lucas and I were walking by the river, the same spot where we'd first held hands. He stopped, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket. I wrote something for you, he said. I unfolded it, my hands trembling. It was a poem, titled tissues under the door. The words were simple but piercing, tracing our story, the tears, the kindness, the love that grew from it. The last line read, "You were my stranger, my shelter, my home." I looked up, tears blurring my vision. "Lucas, it's everything." He stepped closer, his voice soft. "You're my everything." We kissed, the world falling away. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise. A vow to face whatever came next together. Spring came to Willow Creek, and with it, a sense of renewal. Travis moved away, his anger no match for the town's quiet strength. Lucas and I moved in together, a small apartment above the bookstore. We filled it with books, poems, and the tissues I'd kept from that first day, now framed on our wall. I started teaching too, helping Lucas with his classes. We created a safe space for kids who felt different, a place where they could be themselves. Every time a student smiled or shared a story, I thought of the cafe, of the tissues, of the stranger who'd cared enough to change my life. One evening, we sat in the rusty mug, our hands entwined on the table. Maddie brought us a cake, a gift from the regulars. "To love," she said, raising her coffee mug. "To love," we echoed, and the room filled with applause. I looked at Lucas, his eyes reflecting the fairy lights, and knew I was home. The tissues had been a small gesture, but they'd led me here to a town that accepted us, to a man who loved me, to a life I'd never dared to dream of. I was ready, not just to meet the stranger who cared, but to build a future with him, one kind moment at a time.